Hey Winfrey Church, hope you're doing well today. I wanted to bring you a devotional entitled Deeply Rooted. And I'm wearing my shirt for it. Deeply Rooted, and you can see a picture of a tree there with some roots going down, right? This is my old high school alumni association shirt. And I want to talk about having deep roots. So yesterday I was at the removal of the Stonewall Jackson monument there in downtown Richmond, and just wanted to go to be there and see all that and be a part of that experience. And it was a fascinating experience, I will say that. It just was, you could tell it was a moment in history, where something powerful was happening. And I was thinking that regardless of how you feel about the statues themselves and whether they should stay up or come down and the implications of all that, and even regardless of all the debates about, systemic racism now in our country and how much we have of it or don't or whatever, one thing that I think everybody can and should be able to agree on is that our country and every civilization, every group of people has had at some point, many points in their history, deep roots of racism or deep roots of oppressing other people, deep roots of intolerance, whatever you want to call it. Deep roots of looking at other people differently and then treating them differently because of that. Or even just deep roots of, I don't care how they look or what I feel about them, I'm just going to subjugate them because I'm more powerful. I mean, that's a human problem, and then humans get together and it becomes a group problem, right? So I think we can all agree on that, and it goes back as far as time. I mean, the Israelites are in Egypt, and one day, years before, they're ruling the land there in Goshen, and Pharaoh's happy to have them, and then years later, the other Pharaoh comes in and gets afraid and wants to subjugate them as slaves. I mean, it's a problem, and it's a problem that has to do with our hearts and a lot of different angles on that, but it's got deep roots. It's got deep roots. You could say sin has deep roots in us, right? Why is that? Why is it that we develop deep roots? It's because we get used to something. It's because we develop attachments as human beings. And one thing Jesus, the Bible, God encourages us to do, from the beginning to the end, is take our attachments and put them on to Him. To trade our attachments in this world for an attachment to Him and to His kingdom. And to Him, into a relationship with Him, the person of Jesus Christ. When we do that, we develop deep roots in a positive way. But it's hard for us. It's really challenging for us. And one of the areas I think it's really challenging for us when you're talking about, what are the deep roots God wants us to develop? He wants us to develop deep roots of love, of peace, of joy, patience, spiritual gifts, all of that. One of them that's really hard for us is faith. It's hard for us to develop deep roots of faith. Why? Because if I'm gonna put my faith in something as a human being, but to put it in God who I can't see, or I can't see in the same way I can see other things, it usually makes us put our attachment, our faith, in things that we can see. So I put my faith in myself, I put it in my mind, I put it in my abilities, in my job, in my relationships, in that other person, my money, whatever it may be. And God says, I need you to trade that and put it over here in me. And that can be scary for us. But God says, when the Bible talks about faith, it talks about it in unequivocal terms. It talks about it in ways that are very firm and very concrete, because it's so important. It's everything to our Christian life, to our life with God. One of my favorite verses that talks about faith is in Hebrews 11, which is the chapter on faith. But this is a verse that we don't always say as much. This is verse 6 of chapter 11. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who seek Him. Faith is everything. Faith is my relationship with God. Earlier in the chapter, by faith, we trust that God made the world. By faith, everything in my relationship with God comes to be. When it talks about the definition of faith, Hebrews 11:1, it says it's the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. It's not wishy-washy. It's not, I hope, I think, maybe, maybe not, we'll see. It's the assurance of things hoped for. Some versions say the evidence of things not seen. Faith is everything. in our life with God. But because it's everything, it's the hardest thing, okay? So Matthew 17 tells us why it's so hard. Jesus heals a demon-possessed boy. A father brings a boy to Jesus, to the disciples, who's demon-possessed. The disciples can't cast the demon out. Jesus says to them in verse 17, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you?" Jesus cast the demon out. The disciples ask him, "Why couldn't we cast it out?" And he says to them, verse 20, "Because of your little faith." The challenge we have with faith is we think it's an amount. So we're constantly trying to get more faith. What can I do to get more faith? And vice versa, we put ourselves down for not having enough faith. If I just had more faith, well, I just don't have enough faith, and I need to get more faith. That will keep us in a cycle our whole life, just kind of staying right here. It's not about how much faith you have, because the faith we have in God is Jesus' faith anyway. It's the faith that Jesus had in the Father that then he offers to us. He says, "I know it's hard for you. So guess what? I came, I put my faith in the Father so much that I died on the cross. I let my life go and trusted him with it. Now I give you my faith." Okay, well then it should be easy, right? But the challenge is we don't hang on to it and we don't develop deep roots when it comes to our faith. Jesus tells them it's not about your little faith that's so tiny. In verse 20, he says little faith, but then right in that same verse, he says, "For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, it will move, nothing will be impossible for you." So how is he saying, you couldn't cast the demon out because you have just such little faith, but if you have faith just as tiny as a mustard seed, you can say to a mountain, be removed, and it will be removed. I mean, what's harder, right? Removing a mountain into the sea or casting out a demon-possessed boy? It's not the little faith, the tiny faith. I need more of it. It's that they don't hang on to it, the disciples. The word little there is translated brief. When Jesus calms the storm, he says, "Have you still no faith?" They couldn't hang on to it. They hadn't yet developed deep roots of faith. Now compare those disciples to the apostles in the early church. Man, it's a whole different story. I mean, they're doing things greater than Jesus did, like Jesus said they would, because they had developed these deep roots of faith. They took the faith that Jesus gave them, that he had in the Father, and they held on to it, and they nurtured it, and they developed it, and they practiced it, and they watched God do things over and over and over again, to the point where they were ready and willing to give up their own life because they had such deep roots of faith. And that's the same thing that God wants from us. He doesn't want us to get more faith or to try to have more faith. He says, look, if you have faith the grain of a mustard seed, that's fine. You just need to hang on to it. So when you have situations that come and they say, you can't trust God here, you trust God. When you have situations come that put doubt, when you have things happen that threaten to disconnect you from God and from his character and his goodness and his love, you say, no, I know who my God is. And we only develop that by spending time with the Lord. So I want to encourage you to get with God, listen to his heart, let him listen to yours, develop the relationship with him. And I guarantee that little faith that Jesus gave us anyway will develop. It'll grow deep roots, and you'll have it for any and every situation. Be blessed.